The Chotskys, I see you all have that. Oh, yeah. Not that I'm here for that, but thank you for being here in person. I know that we've been meeting virtually, and there's a lot to be said about now having the opportunity after the pandemic to meet and get to know people in person. So I really do appreciate that you took the time and effort to be here. Couple of housekeeping items for those of you who are not regulars to DRCOG. If you did park downstairs, you probably have a parking pass thingy. And so Cam has a nifty sticker to put on your back of your ticket so you can validate and be able to escape the building and not be permanently stuck here. We'd like to recognize those elected officials that are in the room that got reelected, myself included, but also Nicole Spear and anybody else. We had a much tougher time. You can ask her about that during a break. But we're glad that you're here. And so the next thing that I'd like to do is just actually do a quick round robin around the room so that we can all know who's who. So we'll start with the Executive Director, Rex.
Great. Good morning, everybody. Doug Rex, Executive Director, DRCOG.
Hi, everybody. Happy Friday. I'm Chris Selk, Program Manager for Communications and Engagement.
Good morning. I'm Emily Bear, and council member in the town of Erie.
Good morning, Steve Douglas, Mayor of Commerce City.
Nicole Spear, Boulder City Council, and apologies, my voice is kind of gone. I'm not contagious.
Luke Charbonneau, Senior Program Specialist for Incentives and Advice.
Crystal Eichelkamp, Senior Policy Specialist with the Building Policy Collaborative with DRCOG.
Stephen Shepard, the Chief Staff Officer of the Building Owners and Managers Association.
Good morning, Fernando Briones, Senior Program Specialist for the Low Income Program.
Good morning, everyone. Mac Prather, Program Manager for our Incentives and Low Income Program with Powerhead, Colorado.
Good morning, everyone. Greg Meow, Program Manager for the Building Policy Collaborative.
Hello, everyone. Charnel Smith, Director of Programming with BPAS.
Rich Kondo.
Program Manager for Workforce and Industry Development at DRCOG.
I'm Robert Spots. I manage the Powerhead Colorado program at DRCOG.
And bringing up the caboose, I'm Cam Kennedy. I'm the Division Assistant at DRCOG. Back to you, Chair Kondo.
Okay, thank you. So today we don't really have any action items. This is more of an opportunity, A, to network, get to know each other, which is very important. B, we'll have a couple of items, informational items, and I believe it looks like a brainstorming opportunity. And then one other item that I wanted to just put out there, and perhaps maybe you can mull over this as we go through this meeting, is obviously we lost our exalted leader who was ridden off into the sunset, Indiana Jones style. So I, as your vice chair now, am your chair. And so if there is anybody who is interested in wanting to serve as a vice chair capacity, if you could just kind of think it over. And if you're so inclined and interested, please come see me or see Cam.
Just a point of clarification on that, it has to be a DRCOG board member, as according to the committee guidelines.
Very good. All right. Thank you for keeping me honest and straight. All right. So with that, I'm going to turn over to Cam. I believe you have the agenda, or do we want to just go ahead and jump right into it?
I have the agenda. So I believe the first item on the list is with Clay McComb. DORA Sunrise Engagement Session. Clay.
Yeah, I'll just share real quick. If you remember a few meetings ago, probably earlier this summer, we met and presented on the potential to submit an application on behalf of DRCOG to DORA, recommending a comprehensive review of HVAC licensing in Colorado. So not recommending that we draft any bill that would be a state HVAC license, but simply recommending that DORA review the licensing process for HVAC technicians. As a high-level review, right now, Colorado does not have a state HVAC license. They have a state electrical license and a state plumbing license. So it's very simple to get licensed in those professions, but the main profession we're working with in our program here is HVAC. And as it currently sits, you need a different license for each jurisdiction you're in. Broomfield, North Glen, Denver, Aurora, Castle Rock. Some contractors to serve this territory that we're in have as many as 20 to 30 different licenses that they have to renew every year. That's not that big of a burden for big businesses, but for small mom and pop shops, it's a lot of work, a lot of administrative burden, and they've wanted change for a while now. So since we're representing the region, since we're launching a building decarbonization program, we thought who better to, submit this application to DORA. They are doing that review right now, and they will publish their stance and their official take at the end of the year. So December 31st, DORA will publish a public report saying whether they're in favor or against a state license and reason behind that. As part of the review process, there's some stakeholder engagement that they go through. We recommended, DORA, would you be interested in meeting with some of our stakeholders in the industry? They said they don't normally do that in person. They normally just take a Google Doc of comments, but they said, if you guys organize it, we'll show up. So they said they hadn't done that in 10 years. But we organized it downtown Denver. Doug told me no one would show up, which I did. But we, all in all, we held one session in the morning for industry stakeholders, and then one session in the afternoon for local government permitting offices. And all in all, I think total we had over 200 in attendance for the day. And Dora was there, and I think they were pretty blown away by the amount of attendance, both in person and hybrid. And they aggregated all the notes, all the feedback from that day of info, and then sent that over to Dora. Here you go. Yeah, take it. And so anyways, just want to thank those of you in the room who helped out with those sessions. And we will know more again December 31st. But officially, that's kind of where the line ends for us. We have no more work to do on that end. So anyways, just want to provide that update. Thank you.
Questions? Yes. Comments, questions? Yes. Go
I
ahead.
just have one question. It seems like if they didn't expect anybody to show up and around 200 people showed up, that might be a sign for them that this is something worth pursuing. Is that a correct assumption?
I think they were definitely surprised at just the amount of, it was pretty united feedback too, especially on the industry side. I think across the board, the unions showed up in huge numbers. Both electrical, plumbers, pipe fitters unions were all there in favor of it. They've tried to do this in the past as well, the unions have. They said they can never get past the local government side of things. And if you remember the board meeting we had a pretty robust in favor, that a lot thanks to you, Councilman Spear, but and Director Levy, but they were pretty surprised that a lot of the local permitting offices were also somewhat open-minded to this concept too. So.
Also say, I mean, on the session in the afternoon with local governments, I mean, it was certainly more mixed, right? I mean, particularly, I think the Springs was kind of,
They can ask about that. I heard the chatter with Mayor Douglas.
Yeah.
Colorado Springs came up actually.
Yeah, they reached out to us and said that they have their own system in Colorado Springs for licensing. They like it there. And it's the Pike Peak Regional Building Council, I think. So, we don't want to mix up a process that's already happening in certain jurisdictions. But again, that's not even what we're recommending. We're just recommending the review of, can we explore options for a floor of standards across the state? How that actually is implemented. Again, we're not even touching that. That's not going to be DRCOG's position.
We ran into that challenge with a bill they were trying to run this past year around security guards.
Okay, yeah.
Right, and there was the training aspect and all that, and again, Colorado Springs and Denver both in that instance have their own program. And I think because of the home rule, it creates some challenges when you have that statewide thing. And so, yeah, I think that if we can solve that piece of the puzzle, it could open the door for forever. I mean, because like we're in favor of security guards being licensed, and we don't want just anybody showing up, right? So I think across the board for almost any industry, if we could solve that problem, and maybe that is a DRCOG thing as to how can you make it work to where the state set it up to where the state has a program, but then you apply for an exemption if you, like we do with building performance standards now, right? If you're in Denver, you don't have to comply with the state now. Yeah. So is there a way? So I just wanted to throw that out there. I think it would be a beneficial thing all the way around for more than just this, if we can figure out that.
That's great input.
Well, my question was, does it eliminate, like the Springs process to have a state process? Will it eliminate or will it complement?
So I've asked a lot about the plumbing board and plumbing license and electrical, because I think those are the closest, hypothetical scenarios we can look to. And my understanding is if you want to be more prescriptive with your licensing requirements than what the state requires, the state will allow that. And the state license will be included in that process as well. And then any additional requirements Colorado Springs might have, they can implement those as needed. I think it's just about anything less than that state floor of safety. And I don't think anyone protesting this state license is protesting because they have less requirements and they want less safety. I think it's that they have such a high standard, they don't want that watered down. And I think we're all in agreement on that. Same with the industry. They want this license because it elevates the standards across the industry. This is also a big safety thing that one of the technicians at the meeting, he walked right up to the Dora guys and he said, listen, HVAC systems can kill people, and they have before. Like, this shouldn't be something that we're taking lightly. And there are people on Facebook Marketplace saying they'll install your furnace for you for $300. And it's a problem. And if we make it too complex to get into that industry, it's going to continue to be a problem. So we find a way to, it seems like pushing for a license, more licensure, it's actually less licensure, less complexity if we were able to make this work. So.
Any other comment or yes? Go ahead.
I'll just say that, it's still register in local governments too, that's the other thing. So they like one license, but you still register in the government's working in probably. It's interesting, Dora is also doing a sunrise review for fence building and musical therapy this time. So they cover quite a broad spectrum. This one's pretty gas into people's homes. So, Dora was so appreciative. They showed up, they were there the whole day. They were so appreciative. They sent several notes to Clay afterwards, just like saying this is very unique, and they just really respected the process. So kudos to Clay and Doug for putting it. Green light, man.
Sounds like we're setting a new standard then for Colorado in terms of public engagement. So that's really great. Thank you. Okay, we have our second item. The thing keeps going to sleep, so I'm like, great. Okay, so Greg Meow is going to present now next on the Policy Collaborative Jurisdictional Subaward.
Thank you.
Great, take it away.
Thank you, everyone. So we have pretty much the rest of the agenda today dedicated to the jurisdictional subaward program. And really excited to have an opportunity to brainstorm with the Oversight Committee about what round 2 of our new subaward program looks like and kind of how we can best design it to support our jurisdictions in adopting and implementing, building decarbonization policies. So our agenda for today, we're just going to talk a little bit about the subaward program large. We'll give you an update on round 1 that closed on October 31st. We have a lot of exciting sort of news. We've kind of collated a lot of the applications. Crystal's been just a big shout out to Crystal. She's been doing a ton of handholding with all of our jurisdictions. Quick preview, I think we've got 27 applications that are all going to have either gone through contracting or going to contracting very soon. So we're really excited to start getting that money out to the jurisdictions, and really excited to kind of share some of the insights that we've gleaned from that process. And then we're going to just talk a little bit about, spend the rest of the time around what should we do with round 2. So the goals, reflect on the round 1 successes and challenges, because there were some of both. And then solicit our feedback from this committee on what should the goals be for round 2? Should they be exactly the same as round 1? Should we expand them? In some ways, given some of the challenges that we ran into with round 1, what should the model for how we run the actual subaward opportunity look like? And then what kind of activities or projects should we really be trying to prioritize for, in our jurisdictions as how they use their funding. So we can keep going. So just to sort of set the stage, right, I'm leading the Building Policy Collaborative, and this is our overall programmatic effort as part of PACO to support local policy change. And our program really consists of 3 key components. One is we're doing some research on behalf of our jurisdictions. Two, we meet, convene all of our jurisdictions monthly to work on setting shared vision, shared goals, shared policy objectives. And then the third aspect of our program is our sub-award program. This is where the vast majority of our money, we have a roughly $39 million budget, $35 million of it is going directly as pass-through funds and sub-award opportunities to our jurisdictions. Actually, can you go back? So the mission of the BPC is to shift building stock through policy. And just wanted to make sure that that's like been the biggest, probably was one of the biggest challenges or orientations for sub-award opportunities to kind of help walk our jurisdictions understanding what does it mean to spend money towards a policy goal, right? It's not a, it's not an infrastructure. And so it took a little bit more hand-holding for us to kind of help them understand what are the types of activities. So the other reminder, so round one, which just closed, it was a formula funded sub-award opportunity that was approved by all of the boards and committees. And just as a reminder, the formula was roughly based on existing population and jobs as a proxy for basically what does our existing building stock look like in those sectors, and then projected growth in population and jobs, again, as a proxy for projected building impact and the associated greenhouse gas emissions. And it was weighted slightly more towards existing conditions and slightly less towards future. And the award tiers were $50,000 over 4 years for smallest jurisdictions, which in our case are somewhere in the range of like 76 people, all the way up to $2 million for our largest jurisdictions, which are close to 800,000. So just previewing that for you as we lead into some of the challenges that came up. Next slide, please. So just a reminder, the sub-award goals: reducing building-related climate pollution emissions through policy, supporting jurisdictional capacity to adopt and implement. And I want to that was really workshopped a lot in the development of the first round, this lack of capacity that we really needed to address. And then to support the jurisdictions in their participation in the BPC and to really support them in accessing all the peer support, right? It's one thing to just give you capacity, but we also know that there's a lot of training and handholding that we need to do along the way. So that was the third goal of the sub-award. So the eligible uses that were identified, the number one, staff capacity. New staff, whether it's energy policy analysts, sustainability staff, plan reviewers for energy code, any of the different types of, there's probably, I would say, 4 job descriptions that kind of came up most routinely in terms of the types of activities we were hoping to support. Training and certification, so trying to address some of the gaps that we have in the existing workforce and get them more up to speed on some of this building policy specific trainings. Technical assistance for localized research, local impacts. So we have a lot of diversity in sort of where people are going with their TA. Permitting and system support. A lot of the, as we adopt these policies, a lot of our jurisdictions are going to have to update their systems, and also address some of the challenges that exist within their permitting processes and laws, in order to make sort of equalize what it means to permit and install electrified HVAC equipment versus gas. And then really the other thing that we really encouraged almost everyone to apply for was funding for engagement and locally led engagement and coordination on these policies. We're anticipating that we will have model policies that address all of the sectors variously of our building sector by the end of 2026, and everyone's going to have to figure out how to get it adopted at council. And so we want to make sure that people have money to spend on building local support, and everything that's necessary within a successful policy adoption process. So I'm going to turn it over to Crystal now to talk a little bit about the round 1 results, and then I'll jump back in as we go to sub-award round 2.
And Greg, chime in if I miss anything on these slides. So providing some results on round one, as Greg mentioned, it just closed on Halloween, October 31st. These stats are a little bit, we have some updates. So as Greg mentioned, we actually ended up with 27 jurisdictions applying. He's still equating between like 40 to 50% of our jurisdictions. We did have a few jurisdictions reject participation in the building policy collaborative as well as the subaward itself. We actually do have collaborations between 3 different jurisdictions. I believe we had North Glen and Superior working together, we had Sheridan and Englewood collaborating, and then we had Brighton and another jurisdiction that I'm forgetting, so apologies, but we actually did end up with a few collaborations. They just came in at the deadline. And we actually had 4 applications come in August, September-ish, but then the rest of them came in around the deadline. For the funds, we're actually obligating 75% of the total 34.8 million. It's ending up to be around 25 million, so a little bit more of a higher number than what's on the slide. Most applicants or jurisdictions were of the formula amounts of $300,000 and above. We only had 1 jurisdiction that had around the 50,000. And then all the remaining funds will be used around 2 that we will chat about today. That's around 9 to 10 million. For the eligible uses that Greg went over, most applications, I think it's about 98% selected staffing. Jurisdictions can do this in a variety of ways too. We want to be flexible with them. It can be internal staff hires, or it can be going through consultants or vendors that provide them that staff. So that was the most popular eligible use. Training and certification was the second most popular to help upskill their current staff, as well as a lot of jurisdictions mentioned that they will be hiring hopefully qualified applicants, but they wanted to open the doors to other people who maybe weren't as experienced in this field, but train them and bring them into the fold. So I think that's a great workforce opportunity. Technical assistance was the other big category, and a lot of different things fell into this. A lot of sustainability and comprehensive plan updates, greenhouse gas inventory updates fell into this as well. A lot of policy adoption and implementation support, which is the point of the grant. But we have a lot of new construction policies and some that we weren't expecting. So we got a lot of, meeting the state's minimums, going above and beyond on the new construction side, but we also saw a few embodied carbon research, analysis, and policy exploration come up there as well, which is really, really new in this sector. For existing building policy, we have a few jurisdictions looking at benchmarking policies by themselves or in collaboration with building performance standards. And then also looking at residential transparency for single family, multifamily, and trying to bring that building stock into the fold of this as well.
And quickly, if you don't know what residential transparency is, it's basically a policy that would require a home energy score for all residential buildings, so that when people go through the home buying process, they basically have like a graded score of how efficient the building is and what the projected utility costs for that building will be.
If you ever have questions at the end, I'm a policy nerd, so I like to talk about that, so I'll fill you in on that. Permitting system updates and software, as Greg mentioned, a lot of permitting tied to the code. A few jurisdictions mentioned that they don't have good ways to flag if it's a new heat pump installation and things like that. Denver's application was one that really stood out too, of streamlining their current permitting system and decreasing the wait time and things like that. So they're really trying to amp up their system. Other things that fell into this too was implementation support for a lot of existing building policies. Those policies are usually pretty heavy and burdensome on jurisdictions. You need databases, you need staff, but you also need databases, maps, public dashboards, a lot of research and data collection. So the permitting systems bucket was also covering a lot of that. So the kind of some demographics of round one. Jurisdictional characteristics. We found that we were kind of not incentivizing as much the more southern or mountain communities. That will also come into play because a lot of them had the 50,000 formula amount, and we just found that that wasn't big enough incentive, and I think that's very understandable. This was a huge team effort for jurisdictions, and a lot of them have they need a lot of staff support. They don't have as much staff as they need, right? So it usually involves finance and contracts and their building officials, but also sustainability officials. So it did involve a lot of hand holding and a lot of different meetings to get everyone at the table and really help them understand the point of the grant. So that took a lot of time. And a lot of baseline education on the goal of the grant and how jurisdictions can meet the goals that we have set. With the subaward itself, the 50K wasn't very sufficient to incentivize them to participate. We opened the grant in, I think it was June 2nd? Yeah, June-ish. So about 5 months, a little too long because most of them came in on the deadline. And then there were federal funding concerns, understandably, and we had a lot of conversations of how secure we feel about our EPA funding. With scoping challenges, there are jurisdictions, like Greg and I talked a lot about being flexible with our jurisdictions. Each jurisdiction has a different political landscape, right? So some jurisdictions are above the curve and already looking at what's new on the horizon. Others are trying to meet the state minimums and things like that. So when it came to policy, a lot of jurisdictions came to us saying, hey, we have election coming up, or our council may not support this. How can we still use these funds and work with DRCOG on this? So we built in a lot of flexibility and support for these jurisdictions. And so that's kind of what that bullet means of like, yes, we do want you to update these policies. However, there's a lot of these supporting activities that still support you as a jurisdiction to help you get there in the future. And then, yes, we just did a lot of hand holding and helping them, which I actually enjoyed. I used to work at the state of Colorado and never always got this one-on-one. So I got to kind of better understand each jurisdiction and kind of know where they're coming from. So that's that. And then the final slide I'll talk to with some additional needs that they identified through the subboard and also BPC. A lot of them mentioned needing help to go to their elected leadership and wanting DRCOG's support there to kind of educate them on these policies, including the subaward. And there's some, I think in round 2, that jurisdictions will want our help there as well. A lot of space and funding is needed for cross-departmental collaboration just on these policies in general, and this subaward will not be able to just fill that entirely. So we're hoping the BPC will be able to step in and help there as well. A lot of existing legacy building code provisions and internal permitting processes that's going to take a lot of work to overhaul and maybe not be the most efficient path forward. So kind of working with jurisdictions through those types of issues as well. And then for the jurisdictions themselves, but also their leadership, I'm kind of understanding the impacts of these policies of like, we're pushing these decarbonization policies, but is our grid, is our infrastructure ready for it? The one thing I'll touch on too, because I feel like this really helped the other meeting we had last week. Greg mentioned as part of the BPC, we have this research component. So it's about $1 million and we actually just had an RFP close. That's very exciting. But in this research RFP, one of our goals is to kind of support our jurisdictions and provide them actual data and modeling and analysis on each of these policies and kind of tie in the different like elected cycles and things like that. So this research RFP is going to be really impactful for the jurisdictions. So that's something we're doing, but even through the subaward, jurisdictions flagged that they needed more data or research than what we were providing, or they had an accelerated timeline due to policy adoption. They don't want to adopt a policy without knowing the underlying GHG or energy impacts. So I want to provide that of like, we're doing that, but that could be something that maybe needs to be expanded on in round 2.
Great, thanks, Crystal. I will just chime in with a few additional comments that we didn't have or know when we put these slides together. So as a result of round 1, roughly 85% of our region's population is now living in a jurisdiction that is being funded through our subaward, round 1 of our subaward. So we are going to have a very large impact, and I think that that's a huge success for us already. It does mean that I think we need to figure out the right way to target and encourage new participation and address some of those challenges. But I do think it's worth celebrating a little bit that you know, by capturing basically almost every large jurisdiction, we will capture about 85% of our region's residents. The other thing that I was going to mention, sort of as it relates to the jurisdictional needs that have been identified, you know, is what Crystal was mentioning. We're in this place right now in our program. We are weighing what can we do through the building policy collaborative and the budget that we have there, which is pretty limited, to support our jurisdictions, and how do we pair that with round 2 of the subawards, a lot of what's come up have been really regional requests from the jurisdictions. A lot of things talk about how do we engage with our utilities? How do we engage with our with the utility commission if we have planning activities, and deal with some of the infrastructure plans that are getting sort of forced upon us by our utilities. So a lot of questions around that, and then so there've been a lot of issues that we've been sort of hearing a little bit more about, that I think we're going to try to figure out, given the sort of resource, the combined resource between the EPC and what remains within the subaward, how do we best serve all of our jurisdictions? So that's, I think, basically priming you for the conversation we're about to have. So round two. So it's really close to $9 million is probably what we have remaining within this earmarked for this purpose. And our goal is to try to spend this money, right? We're a drawdown reimbursement grant, so it's incumbent upon us to try to figure out ways to get people drawing that money down. If we have money left over in year 4, that's not a great position for us. We want to incentivize new participation from smaller communities and sort of more regionally diverse communities. I think one of the things we're committing to is to do more, targeted outreach, do a little bit more of a roadshow to elected leadership, because I think what we've identified in the staff capacity issue is that oftentimes, it's a senior community development officer or whoever's in charge of writing the grant, opportunities for those small communities, and there's not a lot of capacity for them to encourage and or convince their electeds that this is the right thing to do. So we've heard from a number of our communities, and we've already started talking about how we can get in front of them and say, here's what we're doing as a region, and here's why you should join us, and here's how we can help. We want to incentivize potentially innovation and policy adoption and implementation. So I think especially for those jurisdictions that are already receiving funding, we want to see them kind of pushing the bounds of what what's possible or what we can do. Another goal that we've internally identified is to incentivize activities that will have a identifiable benefit for low income communities, and we want to maximize our policy. So the model that we are proposing is similar to the Energy Office's Local Impact Accelerator model, and what it does really is it's a competitive process. You submit a letter of intent, and we basically would, based on the weighted metrics that we have, give people a general yay or nay. And what we would ask them to do is to identify multiple budgets of sort of the minimally viable project all the way up to the totally bespoke project, and that would let us, in using our weighted metrics, to maximize the drawdown of whatever the remaining funds are. So we'll have to do a little bit of matchmaking, but I think that it's a process that our jurisdictions are already familiar with. Most or many have applied to the Impact Accelerator already. We wouldn't do it as long or follow exactly the same model, but I think this multi-tiered budget is something that people are relatively familiar with, and would be helpful on our end from just logistics standpoint. So this was an original or early idea. I think we may end up flexing this by a month or so in terms of when we're opening the opportunity. But right now we are in the process of drafting the round 2 policy. Either in December or January, we're hoping to begin the committee review process for feedback, but we'll come back to you all with the actual fully detailed out. Here's all the different parameters of the policy. And then very quickly thereafter, open that opportunity. And we're looking at more of a 60 to 90-day window of keeping it open. Obviously, with a shorter period of time, doing more outreach in advance to let people know that this will open and that they should probably start considering how they want to apply upfront. So some of the questions that we have though, that we want to start as a conversation today, we had, this was open to all of our, the DRCOG jurisdictions. But should we open it to, for instance, if the DORA comes back to us and says, we need money to help start standing up the, statewide licensure, is that something that we would consider as part of, opening up? Or alternatively, if our jurisdiction said, hey, we have this great regional idea, but we want DRCOG to administer, is that another opportunity that, where we would write that into our policy as eligible use? I think we're probably want to maintain all of the existing eligible uses, but what we did here, especially I think from the more politically conservative communities, is that it's hard to commit to the policies. And what maybe we could do is we could do a municipal building plan for a plan for how are we gonna electrify all of, our county's buildings. And I think that's not something we funded in round one, but is that something we wanna consider in round two, is sort of like more precursor demonstration type style policies or plans that might lead to building local buy-in for these policies and easing the kind of policy adoption process. So that's something that we were going to talk about today. And just to preview for you, that this is a conversation that we'll be coming back to you for in other aspects of our program. Mac's innovation program is going to have a lot of the same, similar conversation needs around the parameters of what is an innovative policy and how do we, fund, decide how we're going to fund those applications. And similarly, we've got the community engagement program that's going to have a policy for subawards to CBOs. So just to say, we're going to have lots of generative, hopefully have lots of generative conversations over the next few months. So with that, I think what I'd like to do.
Before we go into the breakout, can we have time for Q&A? Sure. Are there any questions from the table? Yes.
Will we get these slides?
Yes.
Just get a better understanding, we talk about it. Thank you.
Any other questions? I have a question for Crystal. So you said there were 3 entities that decided to go in it together, North Glen Superior,
Yes.
Lakewood, and
It was Superior and North Glen did a collaboration. They are sharing a contract with Safe Built on staffing capacity. So it's benefiting both jurisdictions, but they're both using or contributing parts of their formula to it. Sheridan and Englewood were the others. They're usually kind of jointly managed as jurisdictions. They have the same sustainability officer, so they're going to increase their staff. But they partnership on their application. They have a lot of similar aspects in their program. The other one was Brighton, and I apologize, I'm forgetting who Brighton collaborated with.
Okay.
I can follow up with more details.
Yeah. The reason why I asked that question is, you also talked about other parts in the region where maybe they were reluctant, whether you're talking about the southern part of DRCOG, kind of just what you're inferring there, or the mountain communities. And I just wonder, did you all kind of brainstorm, and maybe this is part of today's activity, an opportunity perhaps to have a kind of a mentorship with maybe a community that is forward-leaning, one that is either not as forward-leaning, or a community that has the wherewithal and manpower with a smaller community?
Yes, I think we're gonna definitely touch on that in round 2, but something we did lean on in round 1 throughout the whole time it was open was we really collaborated with the grant writers themselves, but we also worked with the counties. So Adams County, Boulder County, they did a lot of outreach to their jurisdictions in their areas to do those collaborations, like you said. They said it just wasn't fruitful, and they all They were also working on the state accelerator application at the same time. So I think the jurisdictions had a lot on their plate, and we're kind of just unsure how collaboration could help. But I think that could be something that could help in round two too, especially with those communities you mentioned. That came up in our previous conversation last week of, is there a way to kind of bring all those communities together on one application or one project idea or something like that to kind of reduce the burden?
Okay. Any other thoughts or comments? Yes.
I'll start by being hype man again and saying, I think our stretch goal was like 70% of the dollars out the door. To achieve 75% of the dollars out the door was huge. It really speaks to Crystal and Greg's effort in communicating with our jurisdiction. So absolutely amazing. Second thing is that this means that about 20 people throughout the region will be hired to basically advance building codes in this region. That's bigger than the entire Powerhead Colorado staff. So first of all, that's amazing. And second of all, we're gonna look for ways to kind of bring all that staff up together as we can for areas of coordination. And then third, Greg, I was just hoping you could give just a brief kind of review of what happened at the technical committee when we had this breakout activity, just to kind of set the stage.
Yeah, so the activity that we're gonna run through, that we did with the technical committee already, is to kind of go through, you know, what are the building policy challenges that, you know, still friction points that with our sort of deeper understanding of like what the entire landscape looks like, we need to be addressing, and things that came up there in particular. I think that's where a lot of the conversation centered were around utility level engagement and planning, and around what else? Sorry,
Well, really a lot of regional systems.
yeah, I mean, I think really a lot of what came up is that when we mentioned, you know, would we like to incentivize more regional applications, most of the regional ideas that people came up with generally centered around, well, we could do this as a county-led initiative, but it probably makes more sense to, you know, make it a DRCOG led initiative, whether it would be us contracting for additional services, you know, for all of our jurisdictions, or whatnot. I mean, a good example would be, for instance, you know, as it relates to the home energy score kind of model, you could either fund all of the jurisdictions to hire their own people to audit those reports and do all the management, but it's actually a policy that could be relatively easily, a lot of the back end services and costs could really be aggregated. And, you know, is that something that we could just provide to our jurisdictions that are, you know, adopting that policy, you know, for them, to, you know, reduce the administrative burden and, you know, find those economies. Great, so as we go into the breakout activity, it's intended to be a very informal brainstorming activity. I did pass around to all of the committee members, and I can pass around to everyone else now. Just what the worksheet, no obligation to fill anything out there. What I'll be doing is we'll just facilitate, I think, a committee-wide conversation as it relates to all these sub-questions, and then hopefully we have a good conversation. So we'll start by talking a little bit about the building policy challenges, move into then, like, you know, what are the goals, you know, that we feel we want to prioritize for round two, specific project ideas that we want to try to encourage jurisdictions to pursue and fund, and then how we can expand or maximize our impact. So I did bring the marker over, that's good. So one of the first questions I thought was really generative, that we had a really good conversation around with the technical committee, is that this first question 1A, what building policies or regulations are making life harder at the local level that are just things that we need to be addressing? I think the work that Clay's been doing to address the HVAC licensure question is like a prime example of the type of policy that we are thinking. And I think what we're trying to address here is, are there maybe they're not necessarily building decarbonization policies, but are there policies that are precursors or that will impact the success of the, successful adoption or implementation of our building decarbonization policies that we need to be encouraging people to try to address. I think another one is the kind of the work that Denver's doing and Golden's also doing in terms of what is our legacy permitting structure look like, and what are the kind of non-ideal outcomes that we're getting from that. For instance, in Denver, it takes about 30 days to permit a heat pump, and you can get an emergency replacement for a furnace in 1 day. So if we're trying to encourage sort of equal treatment of the different technologies, what do we need to do to fix laws that we already have in place to make sure that we're not creating artificial barriers to the technology change?
Yes.
Our state legislators have passed new laws, right, when it comes to energy decarbonization. And there was a big push or block from the oil and gas industry of not, just going all electric. They wanted to make sure that they're still in play. So I know that's a big thing. In Carmen City, we have Sitewise. Is it Sitewise? I think it is. Company, they do oil and gas as far as pipeline and all that stuff. Yeah, I think it's Sitewise. And so they want to make sure the homes that are built, people have options. But state regulators said push for more electrification because of the carbon that's produced with the. So now, did this go out to any of our municipalities or counties, these questions?
So we've been having
Or the sub-awards?
Yeah, so not specifically, not directly to the jurisdictions, these are based on conversations we've been having in the Building Policy Collaborative. And then we did go over basically the set of questions with the technical committee, but this.
Which includes staff from local government.
Okay, all right.
But what I do hear your point, and actually it reminds me, one of the things I wanted to share, one of the other insights we gleaned in running sub-award round 1 is that people have a very varied understanding of what the state minimum requirements are with regards to building code updates and the mandatory building code updates. So both in terms of who we are funding and who we aren't funding, I think the state's been largely successful. People are going to the new state minimum. I think what the state has struggled with is that the new state minimum is, in fact, I think for most jurisdictions, both it's less efficient and harder to enforce. So there's the 2024 building code or energy code. And in many ways, it's much more complex and much harder to administer and implement than the state's alternative code, which is the low energy and carbon code, that they have a lot of resources that they've dedicated to. And so just to say that was one of the biggest challenge. I think there's a lot of work that we could do in helping people understand that even though it's positioned as an alternative, the low energy and carbon code is actually a much easier code for you all to actually adopt and utilize. What I also wrote down here, though, with respect to your feedback, hey Douglas, is that I think it is important to understand the gas industry pushback, in particular from workforce areas that would be impacted by electrification. Understanding what's kind of the off ramp, or how do you, if jobs are going to be impacted, how do you address that challenge by bringing them into other workforce opportunities or things of that nature. Dr. Condit?
Yeah, actually, I do. Just two thoughts listening here. One is, seems like the electrical code standards keep changing every 2 or 5 years, and so it's always this game of just keeping up. So I would imagine, some of the smaller municipalities are hopefully behind. So that's one issue.
That did come up in round 1 with the building policies of the energy code is usually
adopted either every 3 or 6 years by jurisdictions. And a lot of them did say they're like, we just can't keep up with these updates because we don't have the staff and it takes us about 3 years to learn the code.
Snowballs.
Yeah.
So that's really. The other, and again, I suppose maybe because I sit on a fire board, I wonder, are there any fire code issues that come to bear in all of this? I don't know. I just put that out there.
There are some that are gonna cross.
And that's been, I think when you hear about why some jurisdictions that have like a longer review process, I don't know if there's a lot of concern about, increased load capacities going to, houses and buildings and fire implications. I don't know if that's how that relates to, putting a new furnace and gas and other things into a house, but I think there's a lot more conversation that needs to be had amongst the various different code officials who are involved in permitting processes to kind of build a more collective understanding of the actual risks and benefits of electrification of some of those appliances.
So there's a Colorado chapter of the International Codes Council. So that, and I know that they've got people within that do a lot of training, especially, in groups and all of that. So if the local jurisdiction is not connected into that chapter, I think the dues are like less than $100, probably even less than 50 a year for the code official to join. And so that's a great way for those to take advantage of some training that they might not be able to do on their own.
Right? Yeah, go ahead.
For us in Boulder, a big one is HOAs and what they can control. And so often owners, right, they have to meet the city requirements, but then also the HOA requirements, which are often just completely really based on nothing.
Yeah.
So that would be a big one, is just limiting what HOAs can control.
One of the challenges with HOAs is gonna be like with associations, is they have bylaws, right? And so how you get those bylaws changed, and we all know, if you've ever done that as a nonprofit, it's not a quick and easy thing. And so that's what I'm hearing from running, especially on the condo side, when they have a single system.
Yeah, and but also the kind of thing that DRCOG in particular seems well positioned to do, or to advance those kind of things.
A couple things I've written down in Erie where a previous board adopted the latest building code for the building policy. And then the 2024 council is rolling part of that back and sort of ran on that. And so it's become pretty politicized. And so I think that there's opportunity and sort of urgency around ensuring that that part is addressed throughout this, that we can get everyone on board behind these intentions and sort of understanding. So that would be education and outreach. So I think that's kind of beyond the staff scope, because staff will do whatever council tells them to do. So and then really highlighting the sustainability outcomes, and because whatever political climate, people seem to really champion sustainability efforts, water conservation, anything that's going to save them money on electric bills and that kind of thing is important to highlight. And then just to understand where, I think to Mayor Douglas's point, where the pushback is coming from, so we can get ahead of that.
Appreciate that feedback. I think we've actually already started having some conversations with Adam Berry over at CEO, who really runs a lot of their code work, both sort of to let them know about sort of our direct feedback that we've heard around how people aren't really understanding the low energy and carbon code as being a easier alternative to the other state minimum. But I think we've also talked a little bit about maybe, what are what's the infrastructure of meetings or convenings that we have to have to help both better position and sell all the work that the energy board went through in developing that. And also, I think help them understand the cycle, right? Of like, what are we, how do we as a region or as a state approach, increasingly stringent standards? This is all baked in with things that made life cheaper and easier for builders and for residents. And right, the model for analysis is not just to achieve our sustainability goals. That's part of the decision-making matrix, but cheaper for building and cheaper for operating and more efficient for operating are other two clear guiding principles. And I think, part of our job may involve, trying to bring in more of our chief building officials and more other key partners to better understand that this isn't just something that we have to do every 3 to 6 years, but that there's a trajectory and a goal of what we're trying to work towards with it, which may help with the uptake and adoption of it. We did also through I will just say, through the BPC, it's become very clear that we have lots of chief building officials participating and lots of sustainability staff participating. They are not the same groups and they do not really necessarily speak the same way or to each other in the maybe even a really beneficial way. So we are really thinking very hard about how can we best support our chief buildings officials in buying into the code. Because they play, no matter what we do, whether it's BPS or anything, they're going to be approving installs and doing quality assurance, and they are necessary partners for everything we're doing. And maybe they don't care as much about sustainability, and we don't have to go and hit them over the head with, here's all the reasons why you should believe in climate change, as long as we can give them other really good reasons to support doing our work. So it's definitely something that we're keying in on as needing to maybe provide a separate area to help support them in their buying.
Can I have just one more
Sure.
addition here? It's really around the, like, how can we potentially think about incentivizing this from the city perspective? So in Boulder, for example, our permitting process for everything takes so long, right? And is there a way to help cities just advance things like doing that? They would have to respond to an application in a certain amount of time. They couldn't necessarily say no, but maybe they could, suggest an alternative location, having to split some of the costs if it did have to go to additional review cycles or something like that. But how do we make it more worthwhile to process things quickly and to say yes than to say no or make it take a year?
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. And it's definitely something that came up during the technical committee as well. One of the other ideas that kind of built on that was like, could we develop sort of pre-approved plans that people could, the builders could utilize that might qualify for a completely expedited process. So if they were electrified buildings that they were proposing, maybe it gets permitted a lot faster. One of the other things that was mentioned in particular as it relates to our could it benefit low income groups is that we know that there's a lot of timeline constraints on income qualified building proposals. And if we could both create could we create a set of plans for low income housing that would help them secure the financing that they need to actually be able to build. So any other building policy challenges that people want to highlight that are maybe just friction points that we might want to try to figure out the right way for us to focus on?
Capacity is gonna be a big issue with the transmission. I've got members who have tried to bring even just EV charging stations, and Crystal and I have had this conversation many times. And they either can't get the load because there's not enough load to come, or it's too expensive to get the load there because right now the burden of getting that there is on that particular owner. But then if there's excess capacity in what they bring, anybody else can now chime into that for less money. And so I think there's multiple prongs to the load issue right now. And we know that Excel wasn't given what they asked for. And then the second thing is I think Denver did natural gas backup. And I think that would be something that would help, especially a homeowner who might be fine getting a heat pump, electric heat pump, but doesn't want to give up their gas stove or their fire pit or whatever. So I think, trying to figure out a balance between electric and gas is because it's been shown through a lot of polling that a lot of Coloradans are on board with reducing greenhouse gas emissions, but they're not on board with being told they can't have their natural gas stove or whatever. So I think we've got to weigh that because that's the way to get the buy-in to at least the low-hanging fruit, right?
I will say we spent a lot of time in the technical committee talking about load and grid readiness, and really kind of the challenge around not having a feedback loop from the jurisdictions to the utilities or to the utility commission as it relates to what kind of demand generation they're projecting based on their activities. Every single policy we pass will probably lead to increased demand. And the jurisdictions have a lot of planning that they're doing, kind of both regionally where their new growth is going to be, but also, they could do a lot of the analysis and have a voice. But right now that's just a big gap. And so that's definitely something we're thinking through in terms of how could we help beyond the Denvers and Boulders, help other jurisdictions have a feedback loop to, develop lines of communication with their utilities as well as with the utility commission.
Yeah, I was gonna also say, just to piggyback on that there are some areas that want ability to actually disconnect from their gas and have the gas removed. And I know that's been a challenge too, because folks want to go all electric. Yes.
I apologize for my handwriting. I will take these down in notes, and if you all want access to these conversations, I think Mac's helping me translate. So hopefully he's doing a better job than I am. So I wanted to move on then to a little bit of just what does this mean for what we want to do with sub-award round 2. We have roughly $9 million set aside for round 2. We do want to spend that money. Are there ways that we want to, are there one was sort of, are the intents and goals that we identified or previewed for you for round 2, the ones that you all want us to, have? Are there any other goals that we need to be adding or considering? And just to go ahead, turn out the slide. We previously said, and you mind scrolling back to the subaward round 2 goals. There we go. Incentivizing new participation, incentivizing innovation, maximizing impact, and incentivizing activities that benefit low-income communities. Is that the right set of of goals? Are there any that we need to add?
Would this also be for organizations that are within?
I think the intent here, well, we did put on who are the eligible entities. The intent has been for this to go directly to our jurisdictions themselves.
Gotcha.
And we do have other sub-award programs that are funding other entities, such as the community engagement program is funding CBOs. The innovation program is probably going to be doing project-based demonstration projects that may, contract with local private organizations. So I think our goal is to try to stay within the jurisdictions, but that's.
I would just go with what you already have then.
How one of the challenges I think, and again, BOMA doesn't do residential, so I'm just trying to think of what I hear from. But one of the challenges I think is when it comes to the homeowner, how do you incentivize the HVAC installers when they come to the house to make sure that heat pump is part of the conversation and it's not just, you know what I mean? So the consumer is not as educated on the types of systems, right? So when they come, all they care about is making sure they have heat or air conditioning. And so if getting those installers to make sure that they're showing the choices and the value side by side, I think has got to be something that might be, and I don't know if that's a goal or if that's part of the challenge, to be quite honest with you, but.
I think that's an issue we're kind of addressing with some of our contractor work, doing a lot of engagement and education with contractors. We know only about 20 to 25% are fully adopting heat pumps, just based on our Excel energy data. But we are going to be offering stipends for heat pump education trainings for contractors to not only know about the programs and the incentives we have, but also know about the technology. Because the flip side is they over promote heat pumps and they have no training on them. And then they might be installing them wrong, which we've seen happen a lot in Colorado before too. So double-edged sword, you gotta do the training and the education, but it's a good point.
I do think it brings up, because I don't know that we actually know between like Clay's program and ours, you know, if there was a jurisdiction that wanted to do its own convening or support for, you know, its own, you know, for the contractors that it knows it has within it, would we want to, you know, have jurisdictionally led engagement or engagement and or education opportunities for those contractors? But that could be something that potentially would be fun.
So to me, these seem like the right goals, especially given what you reported out about round one. What I wanted to offer was something that we've been doing in the city of Boulder for the last couple of years with an infrastructure tax that we have. It is meant for capital improvements to city infrastructure, but 10% of it is dedicated to nonprofits to help them build up the infrastructure. Within that 10%, there is a chunk of the funding goes toward smaller organizations that don't necessarily have the capacity to be eligible for larger awards, either through the city or through other organizations. And it basically creates a cohort of those entities and helps them build up the capacity to then be more competitive for things in the future. And so I just wondered about that as a mechanism for something like this, of how to, I don't know if the timeline would work, because I think we're trying to get it out a little bit faster. We have more time with what we're doing, but it has been really helpful in providing some assistance for them to even get ready to think about what something bigger might be.
Is that, so are you thinking about that as a model for engagement with our smaller communities?
Yep, exactly. And the low income communities.
Mhm.
And I would say it also targets that third point about incentivizing innovation as well, because a lot of times it is the smaller organizations that are kind of scrappy and, you know, meeting community needs. They are the ones who are innovating. And it's kind of nice because it pulls them together in a cohort as well to support each other and just make connections that can be helpful too. So that if they, for example, then decide, oh, we should go in together on something, they have those relationships there.
Yeah. So one of the things, 'cause I did want to focus on, you know, when we think about the weighting, the design of the grant, you know, something that's come up with some of the jurisdictions already is the desire not to incentivize anyone who didn't participate in round one, because then they get extra consideration in round two, and they get extra money that you were disqualified from getting because you got money in round one, right? So there's been, you know, kind of, I guess the intent that has been expressed to us, at least from the jurisdictions, is like, it should be a good weight up to your minimum from round one, and then maybe we should, you know, then you have to demonstrate kind of meet the other criteria or something of that nature. And I don't know how I'm gonna math that yet, but that's definitely something we've heard. But I do think that one of the things that we've been considering is how could we, I think there's honestly likely around seven small communities that if we design this right, that we could, where we're very likely to get them to participate. I think beyond that will depend on how successful we are with our engagement, because I think we're then going to start running into some of the more political challenges as it relates to the work. But, you know, if we did want to try to incentivize them, doesn't mean trying to probably trying to increase the total award. And so we've been struggling to think through, well, if 50,000 wasn't enough, but that's all we can really give them extra credit towards, how do we get them to get like an award that's in the maybe 300 to 500,000 or more range that might really get them both to apply and actually make an impact? Is that, yeah.
So that's kind of what I was thinking, actually, along that line is let's incentivize communities to work together. And ideally get the reticent communities to partner with maybe a forward-leaning community, kind of like a big brother or big sister relationship. So that they're not just trying to figure it out on their own. They can actually have a partner who's been there, done that.
Yeah, I think the mentoring opportunities is definitely not something we've heard before, and I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, the other thing I was just gonna piggyback on that point was around having folks, and it could be within a mentor community or within the Powerhead Colorado team who could provide some of the support that a larger city would have for applying for grants, for thinking about this stuff, for doing some community engagement, right? And I don't know if there's the monetary component, but is there any space for kind of some sort of in-kind staff contribution or something like that that would help them get up to the closer to where some of the larger, more resource communities would be.
The other option, vehicle for this could be adding capacity specifically for small jurisdiction participation in the BPC. Whether it's we did have a cohort that was intended to be all of the small communities, and we were unable to we actually had to fold that into a cohort for slightly larger communities because we weren't able to get enough participation. But I think that's also because either, you know, they don't have a chief building official, or they don't have someone who's dedicated to working on this. So if we dedicated more money to providing those supports to them up front, is that something that we could do through the BPC?
You kind of answered my question, because I was gonna ask, what were the barriers besides the 50,000 being too small? You mentioned the staffing issue. Some of those kinds of barriers I feel should be easily put into the second sub round of goals to give you the cover of increasing the amount of money that those small communities are getting in order to ensure that there's that participation level.
To build off Greg's point that he mentioned earlier of getting another possible 7 of these smaller communities to participate.
Yeah.
I feel like the big chunks off the top of my Friday head is, one was lack of internal capacity. The second would be lack of internal support, like political support, higher up support for these policies and programs. And then 3, I would just say, is priorities. Some were not going to adopt these policies, or there's one jurisdiction that I spoke to that said they don't have any new buildings and most of their existing buildings are single family. They don't want new people coming in. So it was just like none of our eligible uses were really appealing to them. So I feel like those are the 3 buckets I kind of saw, like the staff support, political support, or just kind of like, we're not really doing any of this kind of stuff too.
I'm curious too, because we had smaller jurisdictions really excited about $50,000 too, right? I mean, like, maybe it's I know we've been talking about mentoring more forward and bigger jurisdictions mentoring smaller ones, but maybe there could also be some same size, like, hey, we're similar populations, here's what we're doing with our 50K. Maybe a little more relatable than having Boulder talk to Blackhawk.
Yeah. Blackhawk probably wouldn't want to talk to us.
Probably. I think that's a great idea. Okay.
Yeah, I was just along those lines thinking about the mountain communities and the whole thing that I've seen in the news about them wanting to build more workforce housing. And so I'm just thinking, should there be maybe a way to incentivize them for higher density living to be electrified. Even new construction. I don't know. That was just something I wrote down there. Yes.
There was, I spoke at the City Managers Association a couple, and there was some, and I can't remember what town it was. I was still fairly new here. But it was down like towards Telluride, Durango. But it was a smaller community. And they had like an existing building. And so as we were sitting there talking through ideas, it's like, how could they create their community to become that workforce community? And even, for instance, they were talking about they've got this office building. And so I was like, well, how can you put ground level retail in that would say maybe a restaurant that would help train people to become better servers or whatever to then go work in the higher paying restaurants? And or can you take the, you know, there are people working in those towns, you know, have the work for it, but then turn the rest of that building into some sort of housing option, right? Because young people can, and so I think maybe that I'm playing off your workforce housing piece, that if there's communities that are near the expensive mountain towns that could take advantage to make themselves the, you know, then they were talking about having transportation from their town to Durango so that employees would be able to have a very inexpensive way to get to work.
That's good. I moved me over to project ideas because it feels like we're starting to go into what are the types of activities that you would see jurisdictions fund through their participation. So whether maybe there's developing a workforce housing plan and or strategy that is also electric, right? You know, I think the same with like, if you were to do like a municipal improvement plan, you know, a facilities plan, as like a demonstration project. Are there other project ideas that folks are really excited? And it could even be things that people are already doing, that we think we want to be promoting more people to do. The other one that comes to my mind is to follow the Golden and Denver work of really paying someone to go into your code and see find all of the friction points where heat pump replacement's not gonna, you know, is getting deprioritized or, you know, just bringing them up to speed. Many of our jurisdictions, because they're on such old codes, they will adopt the new code and then there'll still be all sorts of contrary provisions still in their existing code that haven't been cleaned up. And there could be things that people, you know, that makes it harder for builders and residents and other people to understand, like, what is the regulation actually in our jurisdiction? Because it's a little bit of a Frankenstein of multiple different things. So that's like a type of project I think I would personally be more interested in encouraging people to do. Other ideas that came up would be like the cross-departmental collaboration that was identified as a need. You know, if we need planning and our buildings officials and our fire folks to actually fund our jurisdictions and the FTE necessary to convene those spaces, we probably don't have the capacity, I think, ourselves to do it for them, but we could certainly give them money to help, you know, maybe pitch to the city manager. Can we get a quarterly cross-departmental meeting on buildings and the building decarbonization policies that are probably coming down?
Yeah, and I think that's where the ICC Colorado chapter could come into play with having people that are qualified to do that and understand code.
Any other ideas from our committee members?
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Sure.
For round two, are we talking about only reaching the communities who didn't submit an application for round one? Are we across the board, everyone who, even if you received round one funding, you'll be able to?
Across the board is what I think we're talking about. To be honest, I think our goal would probably be to have new participants do the things that we really focused on in round one. And maybe some of the new ideas or the stretch criteria are either things that help get them to that point, or they're the things that are everyone else who's participating that sort of expand the realm of projects that they can pursue. And just to make this sort of more tangible, I think we're likely looking at, if we have $9 million and 7 to 10 new applicants, that's not going to suck up the $9 million. That's probably, especially since they're mostly small communities, it's likely to be in the $1 to $2 million going to new communities, and the rest of the money being reserved either for DRCOG-led initiatives or for like innovative uses from the communities that already got awards.
All right, I'm talking too much, but to benefit low-income communities, how many of you remember, most of you are too young to remember, when the fire department would come and install a free smoke detector? Right, when they were first rolling that out? I'm wondering if there would be a way for the low-income communities, if there was installation of smart thermostats to where they can then actually take control of the energy usage in a much better way of their home and understand it. To get them to me, that would be a first step to get them to and I think we've got to look at it from, whether you're renting or a homeowner, we probably have to manage both. But would that get people understanding their energy usage faster? And maybe the firemen would be willing to go and install that. And that would create a community connection, right? If you had the firefighters coming to the house and getting to talk to the residents and stuff, so.
That's really good.
In round one, we only had a few jurisdictions do this, but navigator came up a lot in a few of them, where they included staff as a navigator to help at least connect to rebates, our rebates, estates, their utilities. I'm not sure if there's a way to kind of expand on that in round two to have it a bigger impact possibly. If anyone has ideas here on that. Or we just keep funding the jurisdictions to do
Joining
that.
communities share in funding and navigator.
Yeah.
So I think it was both navigators for reviews. I think one of the other things that is definitely gonna come up has been necessary for BPS has been just navigation for an outreach in support of the policy adoption and implementation. So just here's the policy's coming and here's the rebates you can come access to make the upgrades that we want you to make. So it's, to me, that seems like a nice hybrid role. We only have 10 minutes left. I don't wanna, I can sense maybe a little bit of our energy flagging, but we do have one more section, and I'm curious if anyone has any thoughts
Can
about
I just take a moment? I know that you've been quiet, but did you have any epiphanies or thoughts, or this is really a safe space to brainstorm and provide any kind of ideas or consideration?
As far as the project ideas, I think my mind just goes to the workforce still. And my thought was just to have more HVAC training. I'd say community level though. I know we're continuously talking about jurisdictions, but to me, it just goes back to the community. I think it's gonna have a bigger impact if it's through community organizations and with a focus on the heat pumps.
Yeah.
So not so much focus on, the HVAC that they've been doing previously, but more focus on what we're trying to do.
Great.
So with the few minutes we have remaining, I think the two questions I would love to get all of your feedback on most really are one, so I think we've talked a lot about how we could maybe make inroads with our small communities, but I think for communities where sustainability is not a resident framing, what are some of the frames that this group thinks may help us make inroads into some of the more politically conservative or communities that exist in our region? And I'm open to any ideas, whether it's, we've talked a little bit about leaning into the health and safety aspects, particularly with like our CBOs, who I think often have a slightly more conservative mindset just to just change in general and policies in general. So we could, you know, are there things that you think as elected leaders in the region or otherwise may help us make some inroads to some of those communities?
A couple things come to mind. Just what Director Kondo had said earlier about connecting communities. I think that is a really great way to build bridges and get just to build that buy-in, kind of borrow it from one community and lend it to another.
Can I follow up with you really quickly on that?
Yeah.
Who in the jurisdiction do we need to connect?
Well, I think just we're talking about kind of like at the you know council level or the staff level. And I think that's where you begin to connect. You have to get their buy-in first. Yeah, and then what was my other thought? I'll have to come back to it. I've lost it.
Yeah, I mean, thinking to your point earlier, but just about community, right? To me, it's the community leaders, not necessarily the ones that are connected to a particular organization, but where are the faith communities at, right? Who are the people that are active within those groups? Who are the folks that everybody in town knows? And you know what I would say to you is that I think that message, right, where everybody seems to be collectively feeling the strain right now is economics as well as health, right, public health. And it feels like those are messages that can start to resonate at that community level. And you know, Boulder, we are in such a weird place right now because we seem to be kind of swinging more conservative. And I know we can talk about how Boulder was always conservative to begin with, but it's what it seems to be driven by is sort of the really wealthy moneyed interests. And I think that to the degree that we can make things about economic impact, about how people are going to gain more money, that then we're aligning with some of the messaging that is going out right now about how things like this are going to hurt your pocketbook versus improving it. So I think that economic messaging, the public health messaging, but really just connecting to the community leaders. I think that's how we get in.
Yes, that jogged my memory. So that's it. We had talked about in previous meetings about having some sort of study or access for communities to understand what the cost would be and would this save money. I think leaning into that and the economics of it, as Nicole said, would be a way to bring people on board, rather, you know, kind of takes out the political leanings and says, here's kind of the data.
Well, that's great that we have our research RFP just got all the submissions and they will be working on developing that exact kind of report and data that hopefully we're not taking that report to all these meetings because that will be undigestible, but hopefully if we can work with Chris and with our vendors to turn that into the like 2-pager level information that has citations necessary to back it up.
It was, you know, this conversation prompted me to think about Malcolm Gladwell and the tipping point. And, you know, he's an epidemiologist, and so he actually studies how viruses and disease spread. And so he translates that in the tipping point to how fashion trends spread throughout the population. And so one of the things that you need is you need social mavens or social butterflies and influencers who are going to go out and kind of preach the religion, infecting others. So I think that's the other thing is if you want to get the reticent communities to come on board, you gotta figure out how are you gonna be able to infect them.
Evangelists, maybe a better word.
You need an evangelist, you know, snake oil sales guy.
So
Yeah.
I mean, just to to draw that back a little bit to maybe what it means for round two, or we potentially don't have to obligate all of the money in round two, right? That could be something we consider. We know that we've got Kearns and West on board and we've got the community-based organizations. And like hopefully by mid-year next year, they are out there in not just the communities that are participating in the BPC, but in all of our communities. And hopefully they can help start that process. But in the meantime, I do think one of the things we're really curious about is like, what is the mechanism for the right venue for us to really build council member partnership opportunities or mentoring opportunities or just conversations across the communities. I think that that's definitely been both, because I think we've identified that need to baseline just the understanding. You know, we've had conversations with electeds that like, well, we can't do this because the grid's only 20% renewable, and that's just not really where we're at this point. And so there is a lot of underlying kind of education that we might need to do. So really curious about thoughts, any further thoughts, just now or afterwards, about how we can, what would be the right way to make those connections for those electeds.
Do you know the utilities in these jurisdictions?
We do know all of our H. Sorry, do we, or did
I mean the ones that we weren't.
Yeah, we know all of our jurisdictions, we know all of them.
Just think how beneficial it's been to have conversations with Excel. We've been meeting with Excel 3 times a week for the last year. And finding those common goals takes a lot of time and work, so maybe adding them to the list to connect.
Do you think that if we had the conversations with utilities, we could bring interested council members in, or is that a terrible idea? I saw a lot of grimacing, so.
Well, I can tell you, I'm on, I'm with the co-op, so, and I can say that, you know, utilities like heat pumps. Because, you know, the whole thing is, it's education, because heat pumps actually could increase $500 to $2,000 a year to your expenses if you're not up on how to program. And plus with these new HVACs, they also want to be programmable, so they can control them when they need to. So that's a savings on the consumer side. So utility companies, they know about this, and it's not gonna, it's just no big, huge surge on electricity because of how they operate versus what they are right now.
So fostering more of those conversations with some of the leaders, elected officials could be beneficial.
Sure. Because it is, I mean, it really is energy push. You have the oil and gas, you see it every morning and night, oil and gas, this, that, and the other, right? They want their system to be in homes and in commercial to be gas and less electricity. So it's that additional missing piece component, you know, when it comes to I'm trying to think of the word. Anyway, you know what I'm talking about. So.
Greg, I think there's something that Director Spare mentioned regarding faith-based communities, community-based communities, because that's, you know, I'll look at the electeds in the room, but I think there's interest in establishing, if you don't have relationships with those folks, to have relationships, because it's so grassroots, right? That they have access to, you know, to the general public, and I think there's real opportunity there, and they're a trusted source, right, amongst. There's something there.
And I was just gonna speak to that, and I agree 100% because we are community based, so we're in the community. And we do have relationships with council members and elected officials, right? So I think partnering with community organizations is an easier way to get to people, right? One of the things that we do, I don't know if this is an option, is we do a lot of town halls and just education, our goal is always to educate. And then you can make the determination if that's for you or not, but.
And just an idea I had around the mechanism for how to kind of get at some of that. I don't know if the money could be used this way. Is it possible in some of these smaller communities to partner with organizations or even homes of people and demonstrate, right? Use the money to actually install a heat pump so that that community has something to see. I think about it like that. I haven't ever done these, but like dream home tours or like garden
Right.
tours, stuff like that, right? Like we're so often afraid of things because we haven't conceptualized it yet. And when it's right there in front of you and you can kind of see it and walk through and see what the process is like, and this is what the final product is, and here's how it works, it doesn't seem as scary, right? So it feels like it's a little bit of a weird way to think about using money, because it would be used just for one or two specific projects within communities, but if they were selected with a lot of intention, they could be the model for everything else that comes.
And I'll just say, when we have those incentives going out the door, we already have church groups reaching out. We already have nonprofits reaching out, those people that are anchors of community, but also own and manage buildings. So I think that is in the plan for the incentives and advising, but the idea of a demonstration, I think that's really interesting.
An open house or something like that, right? When you're looking for a house, when you're in the market for a house, it's better when you go to an open house and you see everything.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And to have some sort of kind of out of the box, and this is where the consulting group that's been helping us with marketing come in, of thinking about here's your box of engagement tools as well, right? So as you're taking this, we'll do it for you. Here's what you commit to in terms of reaching out and working with community as well. But I think that visual, the experiential, that is so important to us, especially in a time when most people are really stressed and just generally anxious about the world.
For some of those communities, maybe connecting it National Night Out, right? When you already have people maybe coming out in the neighborhood. And so then they see somebody, their neighbor that they trust and know, having this put in it, but you already have a reason for people to get together in the first place. Because I think sometimes those communities have a hard time even subsidizing some of those kind of gatherings.
That's right. That's to to your point, just about the CBOs, right? The role that they have here, that just feels so critical, because y'all are the ones who already know what's going on and you know where people are gathering.
So I was gonna say, especially in Commerce City, our communities are hit along the area where Suncor is, okay? And also in the non-attainment area in Denver, a lot of older homes, and those homes could use, because some of them don't have air conditioners, barely enough, their heaters are working, so that's where these heat pumps would come into play. So is this, okay, this is just a small chunk of money that has already been allocated and will be allocated. The other portion is gonna be incentives, right, to install these. Is that in combination, or is that the same thing with the energy credits rebates that the state's doing? Is it a combination? Because it's just like anything else, companies come in and they want to build it, and they're looking at funding their project, right? Stacking. So we gotta teach people that there's opportunities here, how to stack those funds up. And that could be another selling point for this.
Briefly, what we're doing in that respect.
So yes, briefly, that's a huge part, I think, especially for commercial building owners, to understand that capital stack with the incentives that are out there. So ours are combinable with all the utility incentives, the state tax credits. Some of the federal funding creates some challenges, but we'll also have those advisors to help actually create the stack for you. So it's really critical to.
That's gonna be for homeowners too, existing homeowners.
For both.
Just a reminder, there's $47 million of low income, full service free decarbonization part of this program. So that's about 1,600 residences that we're hoping to upgrade for free. 1,600, yeah.
We'll do more than that. And that's not an incentive, that's paid for.
Yeah. Well, so the other thing, that elephant in the room, is federal money. There's stipulations to that. So if you take that, there's something else that could be problematic for municipalities or any kind of government to take it because of our new administration. There's a hitch to it. Is that money tied to this? Because federal, I mean, it's a scary situation.
Yeah, well, I mean, yes, I mean, all the money is associated with that, it's all federal money, but when it gets to this level of dealing specifically with individual residences, no.
Okay. But I'm saying on the government side, there's a different play than it would be just the money coming out to consumers and community-based organizations. That's a different side. That side is more acceptable. It's just how the money flows, right? So the person who's receiving, not gonna have the same impact as the governmental side.
Correct. So, yeah, and the governmental side is very aware of the additional clauses that are included in the contracts now.
Yeah.
And legal counsel is all over it, don't worry.
A lot of those conversations.
Yes.
All right, great. Are you,
I'm all done.
are you satisfied? Okay, very good.
Highly satisfied.
Great. Wonderful conversation, so really appreciate that. We'll transition now to administrative items. So is there any other issues by any of the members here that they would like to bring forward for conversation or consideration? Yes.
Just a general comment, I continue to just be blown away every time I walk into one of these meetings by how much you all are doing. Such a short amount of time, it is absolutely remarkable, so thank you all.
And I appreciate it as well, especially the ears and eyes are on this situation. And, you know, everybody's engaged, just waste your time, so I really appreciate everybody in this arena.
Yes.
Oh, I don't know if you're gonna. I was gonna bring up a couple things. So first on PACO, on Powerhead, Colorado, we are seeking trademark, going through that process right now. So we just initiated it. So it takes 6 months, 8 months or whatever. So, so we're going through that. So we've, our legal counsel's been involved with that application. Also, so we have the opportunity for one-on-ones with the PUC commissioners, because, you know, they don't know us from Adam, right? And so we wanted to really take an opportunity to introduce ourselves to them, introduce them to the program. And so we're planning on doing that early next week. So so we're excited about the opportunity to do that. It kind of jogged my memory when you were talking to Director Spear, because in the presentation, which I reviewed this morning, it was a little bit mind blowing how far we've actually come between once we got this and now. And big shout out to staff, they've done a wonderful job for sure.
Yes, and maybe to the exciting announcement is we're actually gonna do things in the real world now. I said WPC is going, but our plan is January 13th, the website will launch, as well as the Colorado Contractor Hub, so it'll be the contractor resource. On January 26th, that's the big marketing launch. So you'll see us on billboards, on radio ads, TV ads, Spotify, pretty much everywhere rolling out. And then advisors should be launching around that time. All these grant programs will be rolling out, and then our incentives hopefully by March. So this is going out into the world in the first quarter of next year. And we're really excited about that.
That's right.
Okay, there are no other comments, then I think our next meeting is a virtual meeting, December 12th. So it's a Friday, 10
It
o'clock.
is, yep.
All right, awesome. All right, with that, I hereby adjourn this.
Again, if you need parking validation, see Campbell.
Yes. Don't forget to get your little sticker on your back of your ticket.